Now, the battleground is not a piece of terrain per se. It is ideology, values, ideas, perceptions. These are more difficult to handle. Let's then just have a thought or two on this question of intervention. Some, I know, see it as nothing more than a latter-day military adventurism, a latter-day neo-colonialism. I do not see it in that way. It is far more complex than that, and I would put it far more altruistic. It is a search for stability in a pretty unstable world. And its purpose, in my mind, is to achieve that greater stability. And then we have the whole question of on what basis, legal basis, is intervention to be undertaken. And we have difficulties here, of course, do we not, where the United Nations Charter, written in the immediate aftermath of World War II, is designed to minimize the risk of state-on-state war. It has very little to say about the modern condition whereby it is not state-on-state, but it is within a state. It would be a good thing if legality and legitimacy were exactly the same thing, but very often they are not. There was very little protest that I recall about Western action, NATO action, against Milosevic over Kosovo, despite the fact it had no legal underpinning, but it was deemed to be legitimate. Interestingly, when Russia decided to intervene in Georgia, exactly the same argument was used. We must protect minorities. We did see the Syrian question through an Iraqi prism. Now, whether that matters or not, I'm not sure. In the longer run, we will have to wait and see. But without doubt, public opinion is quite clear where it is. I made the point, I think, that a soldier, sailor airman, deployed on the nation's business wishes to sense that the nation is with them, because they are the servants of the nation. And that would now, as we have seen and reflected upon, that is now, by new convention, a matter for parliamentary vote rather than executive decision under the royal prerogative. The media, I think, largely, very professionally make a clear distinction between the wisdom of the political decision to deploy force and those whose duty it is to carry out that direction. The Iraq anti-war march was, of course, an extraordinarily impressive public event. 1 million and more, I can't remember now. Was it representative? You can probably say, yes, it was, but that's, it's not science, that. It's a sense, isn't it? So we need to be careful, I think, over the amount of noise indicating a true reflection of public opinion. You can reduce armed forces really quite quickly. You can make people redundant. Warships can be towed to Turkey and Qatar or to Singapore, whatever. To rebuild them takes rather longer. So as I say, I hope we don't rue the day. Public opinion is reluctant, I think, in a democracy to sanction the use of force, because it's not really what democracies are about. We settle our differences by non-violent political means. And therefore, it is a huge step to have to use force. But having taken that decision, I would think our publics would wish to see the objectives achieved. I'm not going to talk about victory and winning, because what is winning in some of these extremely complex situations? It's my point about what are the political objectives. And then you can design the use of force to promote and achieve those political objectives.
But what has really changed in recent decades? Certainly conflict has evolved. We no longer seem to have war between states, or at least certainly never declared between states. We have what General Rupert Smith called war amongst the people. And secondly, a feature of modern conflict, going back to that 19th century example where Parliament choked off the supply of money for that conflict. Today you go into a conflict with what you've got. There's been a development of our political culture that we expect our MPs to be more responsive and more in touch with public opinion, but I wholly reject the idea that all my colleagues now think they're delegates. Sometimes they might behave like delegates because they're scared of their majorities, but actually this notion that we're representatives is very strongly held by every member of Parliament. I mean, we live in an age, a sort of luxury democratic age, where the consequences of behaving like walking opinion polls is perhaps more apparent, and the leadership of all our parties tend to be more preoccupied with opinion polling and how they behave in opinion polling. But does it win respect for politics as a profession and political parties? In the end, I would say that the pandering to public opinion is losing respect of politics and political parties. What sort of leadership do we want as a country? I would suggest we want leadership where our leaders are certain of what they want, because then we will follow them. We don't want leadership that's hanging back and wondering what other people think before they decide what the right thing is for the country. It doesn't make sense. We did a poll about engaging the public in strategic thinking. We used YouGov for the poll. We're the only select committee that's ever done polling. And what was extraordinary, against this huge hostility about intervention, how clear the British public are that we have a role on the world stage that's in our own national interests. And I think if there's more of a dialogue with the public about these things, and that's what I think we need, the public will be more understanding when governments need to make these decisions.
One of the huge problems our witnesses told us in our inquiry on the Constitution Committee, the military witnesses told us again and again that actually the prospect of having to be hauled up in a coroner's court, or indeed in the High Court or Supreme Court, so affects the ability of operational planners that it is actually putting troops into more danger rather than less danger, because decision-making on the spot is hindered. The public believe they have come to a view where, in Burkean terms, they now have delegates, not representatives. And it's what I find extraordinary about this situation. I looked at that debate with some surprise on the 29th of July. The MPs in the House of Commons also believe that they are delegates and not representatives. What I find particularly interesting in terms of the use of armed force, or anything to do with the so-called high strategic issues in foreign affairs, when you read comments at the bottom of the section in the media and the newspaper, if you read the comment sections, if you read the comment sections in blogs or anything else, the response is overwhelmingly male. Women tend not to come into this debate. They don't come into the debate in the Commons, in the Lords, on that debate on the 29th. There were far fewer women. I think Shirley Williams, I, and perhaps 3 or 4 others. If our MPs themselves believe that they are delegates, and if what we're going to do is make foreign policy decisions on the back of public opinion, then I can only go back to the opening this morning of the interview with Rowan Williams, who I have to say I think summarized it better than I could possibly do so. He said, be a bit cautious about how public opinion is allowed to make public policy.